So this chapter from the manuscript is called Inviting the Breeze of Delight. And I thought it would be an appropriate chapter to read in terms of intensive practice, that it might give you some inspiration and encouragement. Earlier, I described the double bind of your experience of the cocoon. It is the back and forth play of your longing to meditate and your resistance to doing it. This brings us next to a consideration of the role of effort in mindfulness practice. The practice of meditation requires effort on your part and does not simply happen to you. On the other hand, you must have the right understanding of effort, or your practice will miss the mark in very fundamental ways. If practice does not simply happen to you, do you make it happen? If so, in what sense do you make it happen? These are important questions. We could talk about this effort on two levels. First, we could understand it as a technique in meditation, and then and beyond that, we could appreciate it as an overall attitude, not only toward meditation, but toward your life as a whole. Let's look first at the technique. The technique of right effort in shamatha practice is the return from your involvement with your thoughts and fantasies back to the mindfulness of the body and of breathing, and to the simple reality of the present moment. This moment of returning happens again and again. You might call this the decisive moment in practice. It is where you actualize your intention to tame your wandering mind here and now. Because in honesty, you recognize that there is no other place and no other time available to you. It is a moment of truth. It's like the saying, if not now, when? If not here, where? If not me, who? The cultivation of right effort is connected here with how you bring the wandering attention back to the present moment. You do it with a sense of innocence and simplicity. You take advantage of the mind's natural instinct to bring itself back from distraction. You go along with the flow of that instinct and you allow it to happen to you. As my teacher instructed, the actual experience of this in practice is of a sudden shift in the tone. Without any warning, you're back. Makes me think of Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Do you remember? Never mind. You don't need to prepare yourself to come back, or talk to yourself about how it would be a good idea to come back. But couldn't I just hang out with this fantasy a little longer? As if you were a naughty child asking permission from an authority figure. At that point, you are already back. There is no warm-up for coming back. Once you are back, the continuation of this innocence or simplicity in the effort is that you don't nurse the experience. You don't make a little monument to yourself out of it. You don't congratulate yourself for having returned to the mindfulness of your breath, as if you believe that how often you were able to come back was a reflection on how good a meditator you are. All of this is the internal dialogue of your ego. It is the incessant talking to yourself that keeps that illusion alive. My teacher had a name for this process of overcomplicating the experience of coming back to mindfulness. He called it entertaining the messenger. The messenger has given you a message and you've read it, but then you decide to invite him in for dinner as well, which is unnecessary and inappropriate. So you don't entertain the messenger in those moments, but instead you get into what the message is telling you. Now, who is having this sudden experience of returning to the present moment, to the breath, and to the posture? This is an excellent question, one that could eventually bring you to a contemplation of the deeper truth of what the Buddha called egolessness. But for our present discussion, if we give it a label of any kind, we might call it the naked witness. My teacher called it the abstract watcher. By this we mean a simple flash of the mind that is aware of the other on the most basic level and without any self-consciousness. This naked witness is just that simple flash of being back. This is the very heart of the technique of the mindfulness of effort. From here, you continue to practice patiently, with posture, breath, and thoughts, just as you were originally instructed. Sometimes especially when you have been caught up in a particularly juicy and compelling fantasy, it is helpful to label it thinking, silently to yourself, in the moment you recognize your distraction. This has the effect of deflating the drama of your involvement with the fantasy. Notice, though, that this label is a kind of afterthought, whereas the moment of recognition that you were distracted happens before you think at all. This is a profound point, and we will return to its implications later. Next, we might look at effort as an overall attitude, as the environment in which your practice and even your whole life might happen. If there is a sense in the technique of right effort that you must allow the flash of mindfulness to happen without manipulating it too much, the emphasis on effort as an overall attitude is somewhat different. It is this attitude that will determine whether the practice becomes an integral part of your life. It is to some degree unavoidable that you will bring to your relationship with meditation the same kinds of attitudes you bring to all the other activities you're involved in. If you tend to be ambitious and bent on accomplishing great things, you will bring this ambition to meditation. If you tend to be solemn and pious, regarding your life pursuits as events of great weight and spiritual import, you will bring this dutifulness to meditation. The point here is that none of these attitudes can provide you with the inspiration that can fuel your effort over the long haul, so to speak. Each of them eventually collapses from its own weight. There is not enough joy. At this point, it might be useful to say a few things about laziness. Traditionally, laziness is regarded as the most serious obstacle to your ability to progress in meditation practice. If you can't get to the cushion, you have no starting point for the path. You have no way even to work with the challenges that other obstacles may present once you're sitting. These other obstacles, which we will explore later, present themselves precisely because you've begun working with your habitual patterns, or what the Buddha called your karmic obscurations. You've begun to make a direct relationship with them at last because you're really doing the practice. The fact that such obstacles are coming up is good news, fantastically good news from the point of view of learning how to be a warrior. At last you have met the quote-unquote enemy and can see its face and begin gently to engage it and to become stronger, softer, and more fearless in the process. Laziness is the most dangerous obstacle because it stands right at the gate of the field of engagement. It blocks that gate. If you don't enter, you have no opportunity even to experience that field where all the learning about warriorship takes place. There's a saying that 50% of life is just showing up. Here we might say 50% of practice is just getting to the cushion. The gift of returning spontaneously to the present moment is granted to you only when you have first set the stage for it, by regularly and patiently showing up for practice altogether. It is said in the tradition that there are three kinds of laziness. The first is lethargy, or procrastination. You don't want to make the effort, or deal with any of the challenge or inconvenience such an effort might entail, even when you know it's a good thing to do, even when you know that in the long run it will be a much saner and more joyful approach to your life than staying with your cocoon. So you continually find reasons why now is not a good time to practice. You find endless excuses not to go to the cushion. Sometimes you convince yourself this excuse is valid. Sometimes you see right through it, and the queasiness of confronting that self-deception is enough to push you to the cushion. But more often it is not enough. The second is called having too many activities. This is the neurotic approach of taking refuge in your workaholic tendencies. From the outside, it appears you're very busy and that everything you're doing is very important. However, the warrior teachings regard this as a form of laziness. It's a high-energy form of laziness, where the wrong kind of effort, the roadrunner style, of having so much to do all the time, has become a deliberate strategy of avoidance. It has become a way of not having to face your state of being directly. You feel that as long as you can keep moving, you will not have to face the immense underlying anxiety that is fueling your whole enterprise. The third is called being disheartened. This kind of laziness is the result of losing hope or faith in yourself. Ironically, it's the result of your habitual reliance on the first two kinds of laziness. It's a kind of depression where you fixate on the belief that you are an unworthy or unworkable person who cannot accomplish the practice. You convince yourself that you are not capable of rising to this challenge. At the root of this is a loss of any sense of joy or delight in your existence. More than all the others, this has a sense of being deeply embedded in the heaviness of the cocoon. There's an almost physical sense of heaviness, of being weighed down by your experience of yourself. So laziness is woven into the very threads of the cocoon, at the deepest level. It is a powerful obstacle, and it takes many forms, some of which are not immediately obvious to you in your daily life. What antidote can you apply to this potentially fatal obstacle to spiritual development? When you look at right effort not just as a technique, but as an overall attitude toward your practice and your life in general, what can you do? According to the masters of the tradition, it is necessary to fall in love with wakefulness and with the practice of meditation. The essence of this love is your tremendous appreciation for the unique value of the discipline of becoming a warrior. Only love of this kind provides the energy necessary to sustain your ongoing exertion. Only love of this kind can eventually bring you to a place where your life is unimaginable to you without this discipline. You should not confuse this love with the idea that your practice should always be pleasurable or rewarding, or that you should always enjoy it because you're getting so much out of it. This would just be another form of self-deception, for it is not the experiences you have when you practice, but the wakefulness itself that you fall in love with. It is the quality of simplicity and innocence. You could even go so far as to say that it is the quality of joy. At a certain point, your longing becomes more powerful than your resistance, and you don't go back. The Shambhala teachings have a phrase for this: the breeze of delight. This is the felt experience of sudden wakefulness and the vividness of its contrast with the feeling of the cocoon. It is as if you had opened all the doors and windows of a room that hadn't been ventilated for years and let the fresh air from outside come in for the first time. The more you practice, the more you begin to recognize this experience in the practice of meditation and to appreciate its incomparable value. It is an experience of unconditional goodness. It may be as simple as seeing a golden patch of sunlight on the wall of your bedroom when you wake up in the morning. So the attitude of right effort in meditation ultimately depends upon a sense of appreciation and of joy. This cannot be manufactured, but it can be cultivated. You need only to make yourself available so that the breeze of delight can come to you. All you have to do is open the window. When you do so, the disarming directness and power of meditation begins to become more apparent to you, and your longing for it grows and grows. Thank you. I welcome questions, comments, or complaints. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Julia Gibbs.
Hi, Julia?
Julia.
Hi, Julia.
In the three aspects of laziness,
Yes.
I was looking for a word in there, guilt, and I don't think you mentioned it. Would you
Guilt-
say a few words
guilt-
about guilt?
Guilt is an aspect of the third. All right? In other words, the first two are the actual methods for avoiding. Procrastination and having too many activities, which is a high energy form of procrastination. Laziness basically is a quality of, laziness is the practice of avoiding. You're basically avoiding the directness of your life, which is what the cocoon actually is. The third, which is called being disheartened, or sometimes it's called depression, the guilt is in there, because at that point, the habit of avoidance has become so pervasive that you have all sorts of stories. First you had stories about why you can't do it, then you have stories about why I can't do it. And the guilt is part of that. Does that make sense? The guilt is part of your depression. So at that point, the cocoon has gotten extremely strong, because you've talked yourself into the unworkability of yourself as a warrior. That's why laziness is very powerful. It's truly a very powerful opponent.
But I did hear you say the word hope in there somewhere. You said faith and hope together. Were you equating hope with faith?
I don't think I said anything about faith or hope. I talked about joy and appreciation, actually.
I mean, not just now, but during your talk about laziness.
What did I say? Tell me what I said, and then maybe I can respond to your question.
I'm sorry. I guess what I'm asking, I guess the question is then, when there's a cocoon, even though it's been layered over by number 3,
Correct.
and it's become tighter, is there more hope in the cocoon part of it?
Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying. Well, first of all, let's distinguish between faith and hope.